Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the fantastic comedy series Colin from Accounts with co-creators, executive producers, writers and actors Harriet Dyer and Patrick Brammall. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the initial genesis of this show, because it was you, Harriet, kind of just spitfiring out the pilot episode and a draft of that 6 or 7 years ago. And then obviously the development stage went on for several years with the two of you. And I was interested in some of the creative ideas that you feel like that actually brought into the show from the experiences that you both had in between that might not have landed in the series if it had moved forward and kind of all come together much earlier on.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's funny because
Yeah.
when I wrote the first episode and Patty wrote the second, we hadn't plotted it. That was just I think in terms of the season. We'd kind of talked a little bit. We're on a hike. We were talking a little bit about what might happen in that pilot if I ever wrote it. And then I think I made some notes on my phone. And that's when I wrote the pilot after that. But then we did similar things for Patty to do EP2. And then I think the producers from Easy Tiger that we ended up making the show with, they were like, let's talk about 3 and 4 and beyond. And then it really did drip feed. But I think we had, yes, the benefit of time to go, what about this? What about that? And it did grow kind of organically because no one was tapping their watch and going, where's this show?
Yeah.
Also, like a pandemic happened in the middle. We became parents. Like it was a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I have no idea what the show would have looked like if we'd made it quickly but I think definitely it would be poorer for it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers, a lot of stuff we got to layer in there to build that world, not just for that season, but for the world that we then wrote season 2 out of as well. Like it was pretty. Yeah, it was really rich. It was a really rich world and I think that the time that we had was a big part of it.
And also that it was so insular. It was just really the two of us. And so if it tickled us, it made it. And
Yeah.
I think that helped its point of view.
Yeah, we never worked with other writers who were like, what about this? What about that? And go, oh yeah, how do we all fit together? We're pretty much of the same mind when it comes to what's funny and what sort of story we like. We've got a good shorthand with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And even just with that idea of, not having arced out the whole season in advance of starting to write the later episodes, how has that sense of structure really shifted and changed with the way that you wrote season 2? Because you obviously at that point have such a foundation to build upon. And even just I've heard you describe the thesis of season 1 was, will they get together? And season 2 is, should they have?
Yeah. Yeah, it was much more formalized, I guess, for season 2. We really did know that once we started writing it, we had to finish writing it. That's something in and of itself. Whereas when I started writing that pilot, I never thought that it would get made. Like truly, it lived in my computer.
Yeah.
But this was like, I think also that it made me procrastinate a bit. And Pat's made jokes about this, but trying to get me to start writing season 2 with him was a bit of a joke because I had to have like the room just right, the right pens, the right whiteboard. I needed to book that gym class for the weekend. I needed to make sure we had snacks. Like it was crazy. I was trying to make this kind of garden, perfect garden where everything would thrive because at the end we needed to produce 8 episodes of a show that was already loved.
Yeah, I think we felt a lot of pressure initially.
And then it became really fun.
And then it evaporated and we just had a blast.
I just had to open final draft. Like that's all I had to do and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that description also, I wanted to ask you both about the way in which you both have kind of like different ways of creatively thinking when you're working and writing together, because Patrick, it sounds like you're kind of the one to focus on a singular idea and concentrate on that quite well. And, Harriet's kind of like, what about this thing over here? And what about that thing over there? And those two different styles of thinking really lend themselves to each other. And I was interested in how that actually helps you creatively to think in 2 very different ways.
Well, Patty's quite good actually, I think at macro.
Yeah.
You maybe have more experience anyway in it,
maybe.
floor, like a long line.
Maybe. I think I'm just better, honestly. I think I'm just better at sitting with it.
Yes.
I don't think I have a natural propensity for story or anything like that. I just think I'm better at going, let's just sit here because we haven't figured it out yet. And I think you're like, I haven't figured it out. it is two different energies. I don't think we're especially like, hey, she's the explosives expert, I'm the knife guy. Like
I'm the samurai guy.
you're not the same.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
you're the knife guy.
Um,
But I think I thought maybe I had dialogue. I think season one I was like, I maybe am the dialogue guy, you're the story guy, and in this season it was just much more flowy. We both learned a lot.
yeah.
The only difference is that at the end we did have to make a TV show, whereas the first time it was like fits and starts. Oops,
Yeah.
I got a job in Vancouver. Oops, you got a job in Melbourne. We press pause again. Oops, we
Right.
became parents. Like,
Oops. That's the biggest oops of all.
so there was a lot of oopses, but this time it was actually beautiful. Sitting and writing season 2 was so fun.
Yeah, it was.
Because everyone was cast, you know, of the main crew. We all knew they wanted to come back. We all knew they were waiting, and not waiting, they had other jobs, but they were excited to join the world again. And we were excited to give them some new bits and stuff.
Yeah.
I was also curious, because you're mentioning the dialogue of the show, if you've started to think analytically about the dialogue differently as you're writing it, because it's so brilliantly detailed, you know, but there's also now the added element of how does this relate back to something that we wrote in season 1, episode 2, or how does this connect to a detail that we revealed about this character? And like you said, even just the fact that you know the cast so well and how they inhabit all the supporting cast, how has that changed the journey with the way that you're analyzing your own dialogue as you're writing it?
I think that analysis happens after a couple of goes. I feel like generally we just write what feels right, what feels correct, something that our character would say, and we have fun with it. Like we both love writing for Lee. We love writing for Linnell.
Love writing for Kiara.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
any like harkbacks, like we'd kind of planned out this wimpy husband of hers that, you know, was doing voiceovers or something. And that bit might not have even been in season 1. We couldn't remember. But in season 2, like we definitely put in, you know, that he's trying to break into musicals now, like just little flavors.
Yeah.
And
then we meet him.
And then we meet him, and it's so delightful, and he's so stressed and he's so good at it. But it's like, that's a flavor of a flavor. Like that's Kiara's husband's neuroses. Like that is like a kind of a few steps away from Gordon and Ashley. And to make that person so rich is really delightful to us, because we do want to feel like every character in this world has a world that is as rich as Gordon and Ashley's is.
Yeah.
Or are.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's just a bit of editing going, hang on, he said that in the last season, it probably wouldn't track. Actually, I don't even think we had that conversation. Like,
no,
I
we
don't
just
think we
keep
needed
adding
to.
textures, I
Yeah.
think is the vibe. And like, especially with someone like Lee, like we put so much into Ep6 season 1 that could be what's that word? Incriminating. And so come season 2, you just blew it open. Like he was just so sus on every count.
But also then have a twist with him in season 2. We do have a moment of self-reflection
And
that
humanity.
is unexpected.
Yeah.
We love to do that. We love to subvert expectations. Like the comedy sits next to some tragedy and some heart.
That's right. And with a character like Lee, we know that some people will watch this, and he says some stuff in Ep8 where it's just like, I don't know, reflection. And I bet there's going to be lots of audience members going, totally, that's how I feel. And so he's neither right nor wrong, but he's not a villain.
No.
He can be a hero in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we try to do.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning the comedy and obviously the way that it sits alongside the tragedy. And I was curious about the different spaces of comedy that the show plays within, because it does so many different things where, you know, comedy is just kind of a light banter on the surface. It's also a deflection from actually saying something or expressing an emotion. And, you know, then all of a sudden you have a character urinating in a nightstand. So you have kind of all these different styles and types of comedy. And I was interested if that was something that was a conscious choice that the two of you talked about or discussed early on, or if that just kind of naturally flowed into the characters and the way that you created them.
We had a moment when we were shooting season 2 where our directors for a few of the episodes, Wayne Hope and Robin Butler, they were on set watching us do an earlier episode of season 2 before they were about to start later in the week. And there was a moment where it was really kind of sad or poignant or something, and then very funny. And Wayne or Robin said, so that moment right there, you've obviously just done this on purpose. Like that's the Colin shift, isn't it? Like that's the Colin thing you do, right? And I was like, oh,
Is it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Like, it's not a new thing to say something kind of saccharine and then undercut it. Like, that's every multicam. So it's not new, but I guess it's the way we do it, which is kind of, it has a different quality to it, which is like really real or something.
Yeah, and I've had some feedback where it feels like we throw a lot of the jokes away. It's almost like it's almost like I missed that joke. We're not hitting anything particularly hard.
Yeah.
And so I think it feels more authentic, for that reason.
Someone's
This is not
described it
a
as like
punchline necessarily.
like subtle humor or something, and that kind of makes it funnier or something. I'm not sure. We know that you kind of can't have one without the other. You can't have all heart without some comedy, and you can't have all comedy without some heart. Like, it's like the faces of drama, the comedy tragedy. Like, they do operate together so well.
It's symbiotic. And I think in that first season, it naturally came out that the first few episodes were more kind of a lot of sight gags and physical humor. And then we start to move into, by the end, as Harry said before, like you catch feels and you're like, oh my God, the stakes are pretty high with these characters,
Yeah.
and you do care a lot about them. So I think that was a bit of an unconscious progression.
It totally was. And even like it was probably because of our director as well. Our setup director, it does a lot of comedy, and the guy, our director Matt Moore, who did the back half, he does comedy as well, but he's just a different style, and like you feel a shift, and it's a beautiful shift, and I think it worked so well for the show. And I think it happened again in season 2, somewhat accidentally. Like,
yep.
I do feel like it's a bit sillier and more frivolous at the start again, and then it gets realer again. So it's kind of like we are doing a macro version of like the undercut with the whole season.
Yeah.
That maybe was a little confusing. I don't know.
No. I love it. And especially that point about being able to have something that's a little saccharine and then to undercut it with comedy. And especially as these characters start to have more feelings with each other, which kind of leads me on to talking about season 1, episode 8, that scene in the car together, because it is such a heartfelt moment and you need to have that connection feel very real, but also their sense of humor and the way that they share it is such a huge part of the romance and their chemistry. And so what were the intricacies of coming up with a scene like that? Because I know it's important to you both to be able to allow it to be heartfelt, but not too sickly.
Yeah, that's right. And like, it was just the perfect line to end on. Like, we're going to make that little girl cry. Good. Like,
yeah. It was interesting actually with that in that set. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I got that's it.
That's it. There in that scene with that crying thing, because we wrote it like Gordon is crying hard throughout, and we did a first take of it, and I was like, because I was right in the middle of it, and I was like, spoke to the director, I was like, what do you think? And it was like, yeah, maybe we'll cut it back, and then we did the kind of the rest of the takes on a cut, like a lesser version, and then we did Harry's coverage after that.
Yeah.
Or no, was it cross shoot?
I can't remember.
Anyway, we ended up using that first crying hard version, I think.
And I think we wish we had more of those to play with.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was we couldn't work out
the tone of that.
We couldn't work it out. We had to build that in the edit massively because we hadn't seen Gordon like that, and we couldn't work out how it was going to play after the 7 episodes for sure.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
Stuff like that, which is why we somewhat control freakishly sit in the edit as well, and all like we kind of build it again.
Yeah,
because that is the tone that your original question of that saccharine next to the comedy, pulling the rug out, that last scene. It could have been cut so many different ways.
Yeah, it's such a big part of our job to protect the tone.
And we don't even feel like we nailed that. That's our one scene that we were a bit like, wish we could have done that again.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out fine. People and I think
it worked out fine. And people love that line, like, we're gonna make that little girl cry. Oh, was that it? I hope we make that little girl cry.
Yeah, something like that.
And that little girl's an amazing little girl. It's just that we gave her the name Berlin. That's it.
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
She wasn't even that rat baggy, like hanging out with her, like in terms of what we even got her to do. It's just that her name was Berlin and her parents were so smug and annoying. It's enough to want to make her cry.
That's right.
And the woman who played her mum is like one of my best friends. And she's just so good at kind of that kind of well put together.
Yeah.
She crushes it.
Yeah.
And they're all back in F1 season 2 because Got to get the dog
Gotta
back.
Gotta get the dog back.
Yeah.
It's also a show that does such a great job at looking at how tragedy and misfortune can really create connective moments between characters. And, kind of the more pressure you put them under, the more they're potentially likely to kind of weld to each other, which we see through the fact, obviously, that it starts with a dog getting run over, bringing two people together. But even other moments like, with Ashley's relationship with her mom, they're able to mend a small fragment of it when her mom discovers the truth about the Snapchat conversations that her boyfriend's been having with young girls. And so how have you really wanted to use the idea of like tragedy as a connection and like a real pressure point for both emotion and humor?
It's amazing. I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah, it does bring people together, doesn't it? Like definitely with that, we wanted to show with the Lee and the Snapchat thing, we wanted to show that for all of Linnell's BS, that's her mum. You can have so many issues with people in your family and talk so much smack about them sometimes to friends, but it's like they are your family and you will always be there for them. And I remember we got some note actually about ep 7 from someone kind of saying in the script stage saying, oh, don't you think you should mention like, oh, sorry about dinner? And it's like, no, because that's family.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was like that was ep 6 and then the lead thing's ep 8 and it's like, yeah, they wanted us to kind of clean up the ep 6 fight and it's like you can have seismic fights in your family and not mention them a week later. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
At least in my family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wanted them to be brought together by that Lee thing because you don't want to think of Linnell out on her own, like for all of her weirdness. It definitely was a melding moment for Ash.
It's a nice moment, that hug. Like,
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I felt very moved when we were doing it. But yes, it's so true. I didn't really thought about it like that. But tragedy definitely brings people together. Where you kind of like, I've never felt closer to my cousins than when we were at my grandmother's wake recently. It's like, it is a huge glue.
It is. And lastly, I wanted to talk about narratively the way that you use Colin, because, played wonderfully by Zach and sometimes Buster in certain scenes. It's kind of great because he's always there and he's always a presence between the two of them, but he doesn't necessarily have to be at the center of the scene or doing anything. He's mostly just sitting in a corner. And I've heard you reference as well, like catastrophe, the fact that you never really saw the kids and they didn't need to be part of the plot point. And I was interested in how you kind of use him as a tool and as a central character, which connects the two of them, but he doesn't necessarily need to be at the center of a scene.
Yeah,
that's right. It was something we talked about very early on, and Harry was always allergic to the idea of making a doggy show. That people go, oh, that cute show. That's
wasn't
cute.
it cute? The show about the dog, wasn't that cute?
And not that cute's fine, but we just didn't want it to be about that, really. It's about two people. And the reason is, there could have been another reason for it. You mentioned catastrophe. They got pregnant, they had a baby, that was their reason. It was a great example for us of like, well, it's not about the baby. That's a different story. It's not about the dog. We can use him and we do use him now and then. But I know we've also had storylines which have been more dog focused that we've gone, nah, we don't need this actually. We don't need to go to the dog park.
We're basically just walking a tightrope of keeping him in there enough so that he does maintain his kind of poignant, what's that word when it's how strong something is?
Relevance?
No. We're walking the line so that he always is important enough. Like we haven't let him go, but we can't bring him in more than we bring in our own dog. Like our dog is right here, right now, sleeping on the couch. He is my soulmate, but I haven't done anything today that has anything to do with him.
Yeah.
So it's like just a touchstone, and then enough to be like, he would lose if we split up. His sense of home with us is actually what's under threat sometimes when they have issues. That's right. I think that's the poignancy, maybe that's the word I was looking for, of his kind of role. It's that, and we use him, I think, just enough in season 2. Some people will be like, oh, why didn't you put more dog stuff in? And it's like, because we were never going to, like.
Yeah.
And then when we do use him, there's this episode 7 in season 2, which is quite doggy, and Patty is so funny in it. And it is like, we use him then. So like when we use him, we really use it. But otherwise
he's kind of like the Geiger counter of their relationship. He's like the mascot. He's like the canary in the mine. It's like as long as Colin's okay, they're okay. Kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's such a great point, and I love everything that you've created in season 1. Can't wait to be able to watch all the episodes of season 2. So congratulations and thank you so much.
Probably an annoying dangle, but when you see season 2, ep 7, I hope you know what I mean. Like we go pretty dog.
Pretty dog, all great things.
Yeah, really good.